The repair bay of Dock Sector 12 smelled like burned circuits, overheated coolant, and desperation. Ilias Vorn stood beneath a suspended cargo engine with a plasma wrench in one hand, while sparks rained onto his boots like angry orange insects. Above him, the ancient engine groaned hard enough to shake the metal floor. "Hold it steady!" Elias shouted. "I am holding it steady!" yelled Braca from the control platform. The engine immediately tilted sideways with a horrible metallic scream. Elias stared upward. "Braca, your definition of steady is why 3 people divorced you," the giant mechanic grunted. 2. The third one was emotionally divorced. The engine finally locked into place with a loud click. Around them, hundreds of ships moved through the colossal interior of Vera 9 Station. Freight drones floated overhead, carrying glowing containers of medical algae, military batteries, and illegal luxuries disguised as agricultural supplies. Giant holographic advertisements flickered across the docking walls. "Visit the inner rings of Alethiono plague. Check required for citizens." Someone had spray-painted beneath it. Suspiciously specific. Elias wiped grease from his hands and stepped away from the engine. Beyond the station's shielded ceiling, space glimmered with endless traffic. Warships, traders, scavengers, patrol cruisers. The galaxy never slept. It barely blinked. His wrist terminal vibrated suddenly. Payment overdue. Again. Elias sighed. "One day I'd like a message that starts with congratulations instead." Braca climbed down from the platform. "You still owe money to that simulation hall?" "I prefer the term tactical reflex competition facility." "You lost 3 months of pay." "I almost won 3 months of pay." "That's worse." Before Elias could answer, the entire station trembled violently. Tools crashed onto the floor. Warning sirens exploded through the docking sector in deafening waves. Red emergency lights activated instantly. Dock workers froze. Then came the voice of station control. "Emergency descent alert. All personnel clear upper docking lanes immediately. Repeat, unidentified capital class vessel losing stabilization." Elias walked toward the massive viewport overlooking the station exterior. At first he only saw fire. Then the ship emerged from the storm clouds above Vera 9. It was enormous. A black and silver royal warship descended sideways through the atmosphere, tearing through lightning storms, with half its engines dead. Blue plasma trailed behind it like bleeding light. Entire sections of armor glowed red from overheating. People around Elias began whispering, "The Queen's ship." "No, wait. That's the Alithian flagship." Even from kilometers away, the vessel radiated power. Smooth alien architecture curved across its surface like living metal. The Alithians built ships the way artists painted nightmares. Another explosion erupted from the ship's underside. The station shook again. Emergency broadcasts filled the air. "Neural synchronization failure confirmed. Primary pilots unresponsive. Impact prediction unstable." Elias frowned. "Neural failure?" Braca crossed his arms nervously. "Those ships only respond to elite synchronized pilots." "Then maybe they should stop fainting during important moments." The flagship suddenly dropped several hundred meters. People screamed throughout the docking sector. Ellis watched carefully now. Something about the movement bothered him. The descent pattern, the corrections, tiny directional adjustments happening too fast for ordinary pilots. His eyes narrowed instinctively. "No," he muttered. Another violent shake hit the station as debris burned across the sky. Without warning, armored Alithian soldiers stormed into the docking bay. Tall, elegant figures with pale skin, silver eyes, and long pointed ears partially hidden beneath dark combat helmets. Their energy rifles scanned the crowd aggressively. One of them pointed directly at Elias. "You, human." Elias blinked. "That usually means trouble." The soldier approached quickly. "Station records identify you as Elias Vorn. Former military reflex assessment candidate." "Former rejected candidate," Elias corrected. The soldier ignored him. "You are coming with us." Braca immediately stepped backward. "I don't know him very well." "You borrowed money from me yesterday," Elias said. "I said I don't know you well." Another explosion thundered outside. The soldier grabbed Elias by the arm. "The Queen's flagship requires emergency assistance." Elias stared at him in disbelief. You crossed an entire station, he said slowly, to ask a repair mechanic for help landing the most advanced warship in the galaxy? The soldier's expression remained perfectly serious. Yes. Elias looked toward the burning sky again. Then he sighed deeply. Well, he muttered, that feels incredibly irresponsible. The transport shuttle shot upward through the chaos surrounding Vera, 9 like a bullet trying to escape a collapsing gun barrel. Elias sat tightly strapped into a military crash seat, while warning lights painted the cabin red every few seconds. Across from him, 4 Elythian soldiers stared silently. Elias pointed at the ceiling as another violent tremor shook the shuttle. I just want all of you to know, he said calmly. This feels extremely illegal. Nobody answered. That somehow makes it worse. Outside the side viewport, the Queen's flagship filled the sky. Up close, the vessel looked less like a ship and more like a wounded floating city. Entire sections of silver-black armor had split open, exposing glowing neural conduits pulsing beneath the hull, like veins beneath skin. One engine detonated in blue fire. The shuttle pilot cursed under his breath. Stabilizers collapsing again. Elias leaned toward the glass carefully. His expression slowly changed. The ship was moving strangely. Not randomly, it was fighting itself. Tiny course corrections happened every fraction of a second, impossibly precise despite the damage. Like something inside the vessel still refused to die. The shuttle slammed violently against the docking corridor of the flagship. Magnetic clamps locked them in place with a loud metallic impact. The doors opened instantly. Smoke poured inside. Elias stepped into absolute madness. Royal officers sprinted through glowing corridors while alarms screamed overhead in an alien language. Holographic displays flickered uncontrollably. Somewhere deeper in the ship, metal groaned like an injured animal. The air itself vibrated. One officer rushed past carrying a medical scanner. Another pilot rejected. Cardiac collapse in Chamber 3. Seal the neural bridge immediately. Elias frowned. You people really waited until now to panic? A silver-eyed officer looked ready to shoot him. The soldiers escorted Elias through the flagship at frightening speed. Even damaged, the vessel was beautiful. Walls curved seamlessly with flowing alien patterns that emitted soft blue light. Transparent floors revealed entire reactor levels beneath them. Floating holograms tracked battlefield data across the corridors. And yet the closer they got to the command deck, the worse things became. Several unconscious pilots lay beside the walls surrounded by medics. Blood streamed from one man's nose. Another kept twitching violently. Elias slowed. What exactly happens when the ship rejects someone? The lead soldier answered without looking back. The neural core burns through their synchronization pathways. That sounds unhealthy. It is usually fatal. Elias stopped walking. The soldiers kept moving before noticing he had frozen in place. Hold on, Elias said. You forgot to mention the death part earlier. You were already coming. That is not the point. Suddenly, the corridor doors ahead opened. Silence spread instantly. Everyone stepped aside. Queen Liari stood at the center of the command chamber, surrounded by holographic star maps and collapsing system alerts. For a brief moment, Elias forgot the ship was dying. She looked almost unreal. Tall, pale-skinned, long, dark, silver-braided hair falling over elegant black armor lined with glowing circuitry. Her long ears carried thin silver chains that moved softly whenever she turned her head. Her silver eyes looked sharp enough to cut metal, and at that moment, they were focused entirely on him. Elias blinked once. Well, he muttered quietly, that explains why everyone's nervous. One nearby officer looked horrified. The Queen walked toward him calmly despite the ship shaking around them. You are the human mechanic? That depends, Elias replied. Are you looking for a pilot or someone to blame afterward? For the first time, amusement flickered briefly across her face. Very briefly. Then another explosion rocked the ship hard enough to throw officers sideways. Warning signals erupted again. Altitude critical. Primary descent failing. The core refuses all command input. Queen Liari turned toward Elias fully. Our best synchronized pilots are unconscious, she said. The neural core reacted when your profile was scanned. My profile mostly contains unpaid bills. You possess abnormal reflex compatibility. That sounds like a medical condition. One exhausted officer snapped angrily. Can the human joke later? Elias pointed toward the ceiling. Can the ship explode later? The Queen suddenly stepped closer. Up close, Elias noticed exhaustion hidden beneath her composure, tiny stress lines near her eyes. Fear buried deep beneath discipline. We are running out of time, she said quietly. For the first time since arriving, Elias stopped joking. Show me the controls. The command chamber doors opened behind her. Beyond them waited the neural bridge. And the moment Elias saw it, something deep inside him went cold. The chamber looked alive. Black organic cables stretched across the walls like roots. A circular pilot throne stood at the center, surrounded by floating silver interfaces, pulsing rhythmically like a heartbeat. The instant Elias stepped near it, the entire room activated. Blue light exploded across the chamber. The neural core awakened, and every person on the bridge turned toward him in shock. The blue light flooding the neural chamber pulsed harder the closer Elias moved toward the pilot throne. Symbols raced across the walls in alien patterns, too fast for normal eyes to follow. Every officer on the bridge stared at him now, with a mixture of hope and absolute terror. One trembling technician whispered, "The core has not activated like this in centuries." Elias looked around carefully. That sentence feels dangerous. The pilot throne slowly unfolded as he approached, mechanical segments reshaping themselves with smooth organic motion. Thin black neural strands rose from the armrests like living wires searching for him. Elias immediately pointed at them. "No." The Queen raised an eyebrow. "No. I'm not sitting in the nightmare chair. It is the only way to access the ship. It looks like it eats people." Behind them, the entire flagship lurched violently sideways. Several officers crashed into holographic consoles. "Altitude critical," the ship announced calmly. Elias sighed deeply. "Of course it is." Queen Liari stepped beside him. Even surrounded by chaos, her posture remained graceful and controlled, though Elias could now see tension building behind her silver eyes. "You are afraid," she observed quietly. "I once ate station noodles that dissolved a spoon," Elias replied. "Fear keeps people alive." To his surprise, a faint smile touched the corner of her lips again, only for a second. Then the ship dropped sharply. The bridge alarm screamed louder. "Impact prediction, 7 minutes!" An officer shouted from across the chamber. "Your Majesty, the lower stabilizers are gone." Another added, "The reactor shield is collapsing." Elias rubbed his face tiredly. "Amazing. Your ship is dying in layers." Without waiting longer, Liari stepped closer to him till only inches separated them. "Elias," she said calmly, "if this vessel crashes into Vera 9, millions will die." For the first time since arriving aboard, there was no sarcasm in her voice, only honesty, and strangely, trust. Something about that expression hit him harder than the alarms. Elias looked toward the neural throne again. The black strands moved slowly now, almost patiently, waiting. "Fine," he muttered, "but if this thing melts my brain, I'm haunting all of you." One officer whispered nervously, "Humans can do that?" "I absolutely can." Elias sat down. The reaction was immediate. The neural strands snapped forward and connected along his arms, neck, and spine in a burst of blue light. Pain exploded through his body. Every muscle locked instantly. His vision vanished, then returned somewhere else. Suddenly, Elias could see the entire ship. Not through screens, through feeling. He felt damaged engines struggling against gravity. Felt reactor heat flooding through internal systems. Felt navigation arrays desperately recalculating survival paths every millisecond. The ship was alive and terrified. Elias gasped sharply. The bridge around him disappeared beneath streams of impossible information flowing directly into his mind. Trajectory calculations, threat prediction, atmospheric density shifts, weapon systems, ancient combat routines. Too much. Far too much. A horrified technician shouted, "Synchronization passing 40%. Another officer turned pale. "That is impossible." Elias barely heard them. Instinct suddenly took over. His hands moved across floating controls faster than conscious thought. He rerouted failing engines automatically, stabilized rotational drift, and adjusted descent vectors before warning systems even detected the problems. The bridge fell silent. Queen Lyrie stared at him, not because he was surviving, because he was doing it effortlessly. Elias himself looked confused. "I know this ship." The words escaped before he realized it. A violent explosion shook the vessel again. 3 engine signatures vanished from his awareness instantly. Without hesitation, Elias spun the ship sideways through the storm clouds. Officers screamed. One nearly collapsed. "That maneuver will tear us apart." Elias frowned. "No, it won't." Half a second later, burning debris the size of buildings tore past the flagship exactly where they would have been. Silence. Then all bridge personnel slowly turned toward him. Elias blinked. "Lucky guess?" The ship descended deeper into Vera 9's storm lair. Lightning crawled across the hull, while skyscrapers emerged below through clouds and smoke. The station was getting closer, far too fast. Impact alarms became deafening. 3 minutes. Forward stabilizers offline. The ship cannot slow further. Sweat rolled down Elias' forehead now. The neural link burned like fire inside his skull. Strange reflexes kept surfacing instinctively. Not learned, remembered. He suddenly pulled hard left. The massive flagship rotated impossibly close between 2 industrial towers. Officers grabbed onto consoles in panic. Queen Lyrie remained standing somehow. "How are you doing this?" she asked quietly. Elias stared ahead with unfocused eyes. "I don't know." And that frightened him more than the crashing ship. The storm swallowed the flagship completely. Lightning struck the hull so frequently that the bridge flickered white every few seconds. Below them, Vera 9 station expanded rapidly through the clouds, its industrial towers glowing like scattered embers beneath the rain. Elias gripped the neural controls harder as another wave of burning data flooded his mind. He could feel everything now. The failing engines, the damaged stabilizers, the terrified crew scattered throughout the ship, and somewhere deep beneath all of it, something ancient watching him. "Distance to impact?" he asked. 80 seconds, an officer replied weakly. Elias stared ahead. "That is an aggressively small number." The flagship suddenly rolled sideways again. Multiple warning symbols exploded across the chamber. "Port thrusters collapsing!" "Gravity alignment failure!" A panicked technician shouted. "We're losing the nose section!" Elias reacted instantly. His hands moved before the warnings even finished appearing. The ship twisted sharply between 2 enormous communication towers so closely that sparks scraped across the hull outside the viewport. Half the bridge screamed. One officer fainted immediately. Queen Lyrie remained standing beside the pilot throne, one hand gripping a railing while her silver eyes stayed fixed on Elias. "You predicted the collapse before the sensors," she said quietly. "I'm trying not to think about that part." The neural link pulsed violently through his spine again. Suddenly, images flashed inside his mind. Burning warships, black armored pilots connected to living machines. A voice saying, "Sync rate accepted." Elias flinched hard enough to shake the throne. The queen noticed immediately. "What did you see?" "Something I'm hoping was stress-induced hallucination." Another explosion interrupted him. The flagship dropped rapidly toward the lower docking districts of Vera 9. Now Elias could see people running below, tiny figures scattering across illuminated platforms, cargo trains trying desperately to evacuate. The station was directly beneath them. An officer whispered in horror, "We cannot stop in time." Elias narrowed his eyes. "No," he said slowly, "but maybe we can fall creatively." Nobody on the bridge seemed comforted by that sentence. He rerouted remaining power instantly. Holographic systems around him transformed into new flight paths. The flagship rotated downward at an impossible angle. Several officers grabbed onto consoles for survival. Queen Lyrie finally lost her balance slightly and caught herself against the pilot throne beside Elias. "Human," she said calmly despite the chaos. "If this maneuver fails, we explode heroically. Yes, I understood that part already." That was not what I was going to say. Elias glanced sideways briefly. For the first time, genuine amusement appeared in her expression, despite the collapsing ship around them. Then the vessel burst through the storm clouds. The lower station appeared directly ahead. Too close. Far too close. Elias's instincts suddenly sharpened violently. Time itself seemed to slow. He saw everything at once. The angle of descent, the damaged tower positions, wind resistance, engine imbalance. The exact second the remaining thrusters would fail. His hands moved automatically. The flagship rotated sideways between station structures with terrifying precision. Metal screamed against metal outside. Entire antenna arrays shattered as the colossal ship slid through gaps barely larger than itself. Bridge officers watched in disbelief. No pilot could calculate this. He's moving faster than predictive AI. That's not possible. Elias barely heard them now. The neural core pulsed brighter. He felt connected to the ship completely, not controlling it, understanding it. The vessel responded before commands finished forming in his thoughts. "Deploy emergency anchors," he ordered. "Anchors destroyed," an officer yelled back. Elias pointed at the console. "Not the rear anchors, the ventral magnetic locks." The officer froze. Those systems were removed from military databases 200 years ago. What? Elias himself looked confused, but his instincts already knew where the controls were. He activated them instantly. Massive magnetic clamps erupted from beneath the flagship. The ship slammed into Dock Sector 9 in a shower of sparks and burning debris. The impact threw everyone sideways violently. The flagship skidded across the station, 1 kilometer, then another. Metal screamed loud enough to shake the entire colony. Finally, silence. The ship stopped. Smoke drifted across the bridge. Emergency lights flickered weakly. Nobody moved, nobody breathed. Then a stunned technician whispered, "We survived!" The chamber erupted instantly. Officers shouted in disbelief. Some laughed hysterically. Others simply collapsed from exhaustion. Elias leaned back weakly in the pilot throne. "I would like," he breathed heavily, "to never do that again." The neural strands disconnected slowly from his body. The moment they released him, exhaustion hit like a weapon. Before he could fall forward, arms wrapped tightly around his neck. Warm, sudden. Elias froze completely. Queen Liari had thrown herself against him in pure relief without thinking. The entire bridge went dead silent again. Every officer stared in absolute horror. The Queen herself realized what she had done several seconds too late. Slowly, very slowly, she pulled back. Her elegant long ears had turned slightly blue with embarrassment. Elias blinked at her once. "So," he said carefully, "is this part of standard royal procedure?" For 3 full seconds, nobody on the bridge moved. Nobody spoke. Somewhere in the distance, damaged systems continued sparking behind the walls, but even the alarms seemed quieter now, as if the ship itself understood the danger of interrupting this moment. Queen Liari slowly released Elias and stepped backward, with royal dignity desperately trying to repair itself. It was not entirely successful. Several officers immediately looked away toward random walls and ceilings with the exaggerated intensity of terrified people, pretending they had seen absolutely nothing. One poor technician turned so quickly he walked directly into a console. Elias rubbed the back of his neck carefully. "To be fair," he said, "I almost died very impressively." The Queen cleared her throat. Her silver eyes narrowed slightly. "You saved this vessel." "Good. That sounds much more official than panic-hugging." A nearby officer accidentally choked, trying not to laugh. Liari turned toward him instantly. The officer straightened so hard Elias was briefly concerned about spinal damage. The Queen's ears still carried a faint trace of blue embarrassment beneath their pale color. Elias found that strangely amusing, which was dangerous, because he was beginning to forget she ruled half the known galaxy. Bridge crews slowly resumed movement around them. Emergency teams reported damage while holographic repair maps filled the air. Dock stabilization complete. Reactor breach contained. Casualties minimal. Minimal sounded optimistic considering half the crew looked emotionally destroyed. Elias finally stood from the pilot throne. The moment his feet touched the floor, dizziness slammed into him violently. The chamber tilted sideways. Queen Liari caught his arm before he collapsed. Again the bridge became awkwardly silent. Elias sighed. "Your crew really needs hobbies." The Queen ignored that entirely. "You synchronized at 87%, she said quietly. One nearby officer nearly dropped his datapad. That exceeds military compatibility thresholds, another whispered. Elias frowned. I have no idea what any of those words mean. That is precisely the problem. Before Elias could ask further, the neural chamber suddenly pulsed blue again. Every console flickered simultaneously. Then a calm artificial voice echoed through the bridge. Primary pilot recognized. Silence returned instantly. Elias blinked. Absolutely not, the AI continued. Genetic combat synchronization verified. Several officers turned pale. One older commander whispered something in Elythian under his breath that sounded deeply religious. Queen Lyari slowly faced the central systems display. Repeat identification. The AI paused briefly. Then, pilot classification, Warborn. The room froze. Elias looked around carefully. I'm getting the feeling that word is bad. Nobody answered immediately. That was somehow worse. Finally, one officer spoke carefully. The Warborn were elite neural pilots engineered during the old expansion wars. Engineered? Elias repeated. They synchronize with living warships at impossible levels. Elias pointed toward himself. Well, I repair cargo engines and occasionally lose money gambling, so I think your machine may be confused. It is never confused, Liari said softly. The way she looked at him now had changed. Not fear, not suspicion, recognition. And somehow that unsettled Elias more than the crashing ship had. Suddenly the bridge doors burst open. A battered royal guard rushed inside. Your Majesty, he shouted breathlessly. News channels already intercepted the docking footage. The Queen closed her eyes briefly. Of course they did. Another officer activated a holographic screen reluctantly. The recording immediately appeared above the bridge. A perfect crystal-clear image of Queen Liari wrapping her arms around Elias's neck in front of the entire command crew. Silence. Then another angle appeared. Then another. Someone had added dramatic music already. Elias stared upward. That was fast. One technician muttered weakly. The station network works efficiently when humiliating royalty. The Queen looked moments away from vaporizing someone. Unfortunately for her, another edited version appeared instantly beside the first one. This version included glowing hearts. Elias tried very hard not to smile. Failed completely. Oh no, he whispered. People are enjoying this. Liari gave him a deadly look. You find this amusing? I find survival amusing. The romance editing is just a bonus. A younger officer accidentally snorted. The Queen turned slowly toward him. The poor man nearly evaporated from fear. Before she could speak again, the flagship trembled lightly beneath their feet. Not from damage. From docking clamps releasing? An officer checked the console quickly. Your Majesty, the station authorities request immediate explanation regarding why the royal flagship nearly flattened 3 commercial districts. Elias raised a hand slightly. In my defense, he said, I technically only flattened half of one. 2 hours later, Elias sat alone inside a medical chamber that looked expensive enough to bankrupt several planets. Soft blue lights glowed beneath transparent floors. Tiny surgical drones floated quietly around him, scanning his nervous system, while alien symbols streamed across curved holographic displays. One drone poked his shoulder with a needle. Elias glared at it. You could at least introduce yourself first. The drone beeped rudely. A nearby medical officer sighed tiredly. Please stop arguing with the equipment. It started the conversation. The officer, an older Elythian woman with silver markings along her long ears, studied the scan results with visible confusion. This makes no sense, she muttered. That sentence keeps following me around today. You survived synchronization levels that should have liquefied your neural pathways. That sounds medically inconvenient. The woman ignored him completely. Your reflex latency is beyond military standards. Elias leaned back carefully. I repaired shipping engines for 8 years. You also predicted collision vectors before the ship's combat AI. That part concerns me slightly. Before the officer could answer, the medical chamber doors slid open. Every drone in the room immediately moved aside. Queen Liari entered quietly. Even without royal armor, she somehow carried the same intimidating presence. She now wore dark silver ceremonial clothing lined with thin glowing circuitry around the collar and sleeves. Her long braided hair rested over one shoulder, and her elegant ears twitched faintly as she examined the medical scans. The older officer bowed instantly. "Your Majesty," Liari nodded once. "Leave us." The officer obeyed immediately, though not before giving Elias the sympathetic look usually reserved for doomed prisoners. The doors closed behind her. Silence settled briefly. Then Elias pointed toward a holographic screen floating near the ceiling. "Good news," he said. "Apparently my nervous system is horrifying." Liari stepped closer to the display. "You synchronized at levels recorded only in classified war archives." "Again with the war archives." Her silver eyes shifted toward him. "You truly do not know what you are?" Elias laughed once. "That question becomes less comforting every time you ask it." The Queen remained quiet for a moment. Then she activated another hologram. Elias immediately sat upright. The image showed an ancient battlefield in deep space. Massive black warships floated among burning debris, while smaller fleets scattered around them in panic. At the center of the recording stood armored pilots connected directly into living ships through neural conduits. The symbol displayed on their armor matched the glowing mark briefly seen in Elias's vision during synchronization. His expression changed instantly. "I saw that," Liari noticed immediately. "During the descent?" He nodded slowly. One of the holographic pilots moved across the battlefield footage with terrifying speed, controlling an entire fleet almost effortlessly. The Queen spoke quietly. "The war-born pilots ended the expansion wars centuries ago? What happened to them?" For the first time, hesitation appeared in her voice. "They disappeared." "That sounds suspiciously diplomatic." Her ears twitched slightly again. Elias was beginning to realize Elethians expressed emotion through those tiny movements, no matter how calm they pretended to be. "They became too dangerous," she admitted carefully. Before Elias could respond, loud voices suddenly echoed from the corridor outside. Then shouting, then crashing. The medical doors burst open violently. A young royal officer stumbled inside carrying several data pads. "Your Majesty," he gasped. "The station networks made another one." Liari closed her eyes slowly. "Another what?" The officer activated the data pad before anyone could stop him. A holographic video appeared instantly. Elias watched in horror as edited footage showed the Queen hugging him dramatically, while romantic orchestral music played in the background. Someone had added slow motion, and stars, and somehow fireworks. At the bottom of the screen glowed the title, "The Mechanic Who Stole the Queen's Heart." Elias stared at it silently. Then he burst out laughing. Queen Liari looked genuinely offended for the first time since meeting him. "You find this acceptable?" "I find the fireworks artistically ambitious." The officer accidentally laughed too. Liari turned toward him. The poor man nearly swallowed his own lungs. Elias shook his head. "Your empire works incredibly fast." The Queen folded her arms. "Half the galaxy believes I romantically embraced a human mechanic in the middle of a disaster." "You did romantically embrace a human mechanic in the middle of a disaster?" Her silver eyes narrowed dangerously. Elias pointed toward the screen. "Honestly, the music choice is my biggest complaint." The officer made a strangled sound, trying not to laugh again. Before Liari could destroy somebody, every light inside the chamber suddenly flickered red. Instantly, all humor vanished. A mechanical voice echoed through the ship. "Unauthorized vessel detected. Security breach on lower docking levels. Multiple armed intruders aboard the flagship." The Queen's expression transformed immediately into cold royal focus. Another alert followed, then another. "Unknown hostiles approaching neural core access routes." Elias slowly stood from the medical chair. "Please tell me this is unrelated to me." Liari looked directly at him. The silence answered first. Then she spoke quietly. "They came for you." The flagship shook violently as enemy vessels surrounded Vera, 9 from every direction. Through the massive bridge windows, black warships descended out of hyperspace, like blades cutting open the stars themselves. Their hulls carried the ancient war-born symbol, now spreading across every military channel in the galaxy. Panic echoed through the command deck. "3 hostile fleets approaching. They bypassed station defense grids. Neural signatures detected." Queen Liari stood at the center of the bridge in full royal armor once again, silver light running across the elegant black plating covering her shoulders and chest. Her long ears twitched sharply as tactical holograms flooded around her. Elias stood beside the neural chamber entrance staring at the incoming fleet. His fleet, or at least the fleet connected to whatever he truly was. One officer looked toward him nervously. The enemy ships are requesting pilot recognition. Elias rubbed his face tiredly. That sentence alone ruined my morning. Another transmission appeared. A distorted mechanical voice filled the bridge. Return the warborn pilot, or the station dies. Silence followed. Then Elias sighed deeply. I miss repairing cargo engines. Liari turned toward him immediately. You are not surrendering yourself. Technically, I haven't even figured out what I'm surrendering. Outside the station, explosions erupted across the defense perimeter. One of the enemy dreadnoughts split an orbital platform in half with a beam of burning blue energy. The bridge lights dimmed briefly. People screamed through distant communication channels. Elias looked toward the neural chamber. He could already feel the flagship calling to him again. Not demanding. Waiting. That frightened him less now, which somehow frightened him more. The Queen stepped closer. The synchronization is damaging your nervous system. You looked through my medical scans? I am the Queen. That is honestly becoming your excuse for everything. For a brief second, despite the chaos surrounding them, Liari smiled. A real one this time. Not small, not hidden. Then another impact shook the ship hard enough to nearly throw several officers across the bridge. The smile vanished instantly. Elias looked around slowly. Terrified crew members, burning station sectors. The same people who hours ago had seen him as a random mechanic now looked at him like their final chance to survive. And for the first time in his life, he stopped running from what he could do. He looked directly at Liari. If I pilot the flagship, he said quietly, I can stop them. You may die. I almost died 6 separate times today. I'm beginning to feel experienced. Her silver eyes softened for just a moment. Then she grabbed the front of his jacket suddenly and pulled him closer. If you die, she whispered, I will personally resurrect you just to yell at you again. Elias blinked once. That was strangely comforting. The neural chamber opened behind him. Blue light flooded the bridge. The moment Elias stepped inside, the flagship awakened completely. Every wall illuminated. Ancient systems dormant for centuries roared back to life. Bridge officers stared upward in shock as hidden weapon arrays emerged across the massive vessel exterior. One technician whispered fearfully, the ship recognizes him fully now. Elias lowered himself into the pilot throne. This time the neural strands connected gently, like greeting him. Then the universe disappeared. Suddenly he was everywhere. He felt the flagship beneath him like a second body. Reactor pulses became heartbeats. Radar signals became instinct. Enemy movements unfolded before they happened. The hostile fleet attacked instantly. Dozens of warships accelerated toward Vera 9. Elias moved before thought itself finished forming. The flagship rotated violently through space. Impossible fast. Energy beams missed by meters. Entire enemy formations shattered as Elias guided the colossal vessel through combat patterns no modern pilot should even understand. Bridge crews watched in stunned silence. He's predicting them. No, Liari whispered softly. He remembers them. Outside, the battle consumed the stars. Enemy cruisers exploded one after another, while the flagship moved like something alive and furious. Elias felt ancient combat instincts surging through him, but now he understood something important. The Warborn were never monsters. They were pilots forced to become weapons. And for the first time, he chose what kind of weapon he would be. Not a destroyer, a shield. He redirected the flagship directly between Vera 9 and the enemy fleet, protecting the station while disabling hostile ships one by one without destroying their crews. Even the Queen noticed. You're sparing them. Elias smiled weakly through the neural pain burning behind his eyes. I spent years fixing broken things. Hard habit to kill. Then the enemy flagship emerged. Massive, ancient, warborn. Its weapons charged directly toward the station. The bridge erupted in panic. Impact in 20 seconds! Station shields won't survive. Elias closed his eyes briefly. Then he fully merged with the neural core. Pain exploded through every nerve in his body. The flagship answered instantly. Blue energy flooded across space as Elias pushed the vessel beyond every safe limit. The royal ship accelerated directly toward the enemy dreadnought and unleashed a wave of synchronized energy that disabled the hostile fleet completely without destroying it. Silence spread across the stars. One by one, enemy ships powered down. The battle ended. Then Elias collapsed. Darkness. When he finally opened his eyes again, the war was over. Soft medical lights glowed around him. For a moment, he thought he was alone. Then he noticed Queen Liari asleep beside his bed, one hand still tightly holding his. Her long, silver-dark braid rested across the edge of the chair beside her armor. Ilias stared quietly for a moment. Then he smiled. Not because he survived, not because the galaxy now called him Warborn, but because for the first time in years, he no longer felt like someone drifting through space without purpose. Liari slowly opened her eyes. The instant she realized he was awake, relief flooded her face so openly it almost hurt to see. Elias looked at her weakly. "So," he whispered hoarsely, "is holding my hand part of standard royal procedure too?" The queen laughed softly despite herself, and somewhere beyond the medical chamber windows, the stars of a calmer galaxy continued burning quietly into the night.